I started sabbatical on February 15th and was away from the ministries of the church for 6 months thereafter, and a lot happened in the United States, in the Unitarian Universalist Association, and in your lives personally. As a congregation and as individuals, you've been living through this chapter of history, and on many days it was strange for me to go through experiences without being connected to you. Coming back, it's tremendously important that I hear from you about your thoughts and feelings and what you have been doing. So I invite you into sharing with me in the coming days, weeks, and months. Don't assume that I know anything, including who moved the printer in Office 3. No, just kidding. So let's go back, working our way backwards. Let's start 3 days before my sabbatical ended, when our nation suffered another tragic day, which was sadly representative of so much of what has transpired and is transpiring. August 12th, Charlottesville, Virginia. People associated with the Ku Klux Klan and like-minded groups showed up in force. Some were dressed in military gear and marched through the crowds, intimidating, hitting with batons, spraying mace in the face of anti-racism protesters. Then a terrorist drove a car into a crowd, killing 1 and wounding 19. As you watched the footage or reflected afterwards, what have you been thinking and feeling? I want to share some of my thoughts and feelings to see if they resonate with you. Some of my current thinking goes like this. Just as we as a nation are no longer surprised by shootings, an average of 30 people are shot and murdered per day in our nation. Most of us are not surprised by what took place in Charlottesville. To the contrary, in my case, because violent tragedies and racism are so common in this country, which I love so much, I fear that I will soon forget the particulars of the Charlottesville terrorist attack, and I also fear that more attacks are coming. I'm deeply scared by the fact that this incident did not involve just a few isolated loners. I try to calculate, reading and listening to what I can, how many people in our country supported what happened in Charlottesville, whether publicly or privately, explicitly or tacitly. How many people support the racist violence? My heart breaks every day as I calculate that the number is shockingly high. Another layer down, how many people are thinking, well, I'm against all the violence, but the point is that white people have been put down for too long and it's our time to rise up again. I think a lot of people feel that way. We just heard Dr. King's historic words in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, which was written during civil disobedience, with Dr. King sitting in a jail cell in the 1963 cauldron of violence and hatred, courage and peacemaking. 6 years earlier, in '57, Dr. King and his colleagues formed the Southern Christian Leadership Council, choosing the motto, "To save the soul of America." Societal progress ebbs and flows from slavery to emancipation, Jim Crow to civil rights. There are many more examples. Does it resonate with you? Does it make sense? Do you think I'm on the right page when I say right now, at this point in history, we're in the midst of a massive backlash, which uncovers, exacerbates, and grows new problems every day? Do you agree? Please tell me, because I could have a lot of blind spots and be off. Or is this old, exhausting news that needs a new headline? Or is it news that begs for an action plan? And or have you ever been working on an action plan that you want to share with me and others? Or have been sharing tirelessly? Or do you think and feel something completely different on these issues? You come at it from a whole different approach. Does it resonate for you when I refer back to the ministry of Dr. King and say that right now we all need to participate, all need to participate in saving the soul of America? I know so many of you have been deeply involved in conversations and efforts to fight racism during your lifetime and while I was on sabbatical. I feel like I'm jumping back on a train here, and I wonder, what have you experienced around issues of racism while I'm away? From any perspective, your perspective matters. Does it make sense to you when I say there are many layers of the soul problem in America? And of course, we, the people of this congregation, are not immune. In some ways, we cannot help but actively participate in the sickness. For example, as a nation, we consume and distribute groundwater of racial biases on a daily basis. The ongoing processes of contamination and recontamination are highly difficult to escape. Social psychologists Mazarin Banerjee and Anthony Greenwald wrote a critically important book called Blind Spot, where they demonstrate how most all of us have mind bugs, prejudices, and automatic associations deeply embedded in our cognitive systems. These prejudices create gaps between, on the one hand, at our core, what we believe to be good and right, and on the other hand, how we consciously think and act. A lot of gaps. That's nothing new, but there's new studies that are showing how specifically it happens. These racial biases have been proven time and again in verifiable clinical tests. They're tests which you can take, in which a predominant majority of test takers in America show preferences towards flowers over insects and preferences towards white children over brown children. Doctors Banerjee and Greenwald themselves have been working for decades against systematic oppression, yet they themselves consistently fail the test. She's brown, he's white. Progressive social scientist Malcolm Gladwell, a white man married to a black woman, has failed the test many times. I failed the test. After taking the test, I felt hard, sharp pain in my heart and soul when I was told, your data suggest a strong automatic preference for European American children compared to African American children. This is the groundwater most of us drink and distribute every day. We all need to participate in saving the soul of America. Like most human endeavors. The current state of America is complicated. For example, not surprisingly, Unitarian Universalists marched on August 12th in Charlottesville in favor of racial justice. Charlottesville UU Church was very present in that moment, on that day. One of the people injured in the car attack was a member of that congregation. Several others were there around it when it happened, and one of the members of the Charlottesville UU Church gave CPR to Heather Heyer before she died. And many others were involved lots of ways. They were in the thick of it through that whole week, the whole weekend, and the aftermath. They are in the middle of it. For a long time, our UU people have been putting our hearts and bodies into the struggle. This lines up with a tradition. King's referring to it in the letter there. One example of what he's talking about, he put out a call to the clergy of America to come to Selma. 500 Unitarian ministers came, very high number proportionately. He knew it. He counted on us. UUs, including many of you, put their bodies into the protest lines time after time. In the 60s, countless times for years, people wearing the yellow, standing on the side of love shirts and stoles, including many of you, have been showing up in favor of immigration justice, Black Lives Matter, the Women's March, LGBTQ rights. Those are examples of healthy, vigorous soul energy, which we need to continue cultivating and growing. What do you think? On the other side, however, I argue that the church as large, as well as ours in particular, and myself most specifically, were too lethargic in the year and months before the last presidential election. I did not sufficiently mobilize the people of the state of Pennsylvania for moral values of decency, justice, and liberty. Our electoral college votes went to a candidate who stands in opposition to much of what UUs affirm and promote. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying the people who voted one way, like me, are good and the others are bad. It's false and foolish to say that. I know great people who did not and do not agree with me. Please note Parvathi's most outstanding sermon last week, if you want to go deeper into that topic. I'm not saying that, and that deserves more concept, but we did not do our job, and we're probably in the moderate church Kingian need for critique category going into this last election, people. And I'm pointing the finger right here. And we have a soul problem in America. And of course, it's much more than racism. Of course, look, I'm a little pent up. People like, look, man, you're just coming back. You're a little pent up. I know, I'm not going to just lay it on, but just give me a moment here, okay? Give me a moment. I'm not going to be like this every week. I'm not going to be like this every week. Vice President Al Gore just came out with a second movie, an inconvenient sequel, in which he makes the compelling argument that a rise in extreme weather is making the dangerously acute impact of climate change harder to deny. The movie touches on Hurricane Sandy, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, a wildfire in Fort McMurray, Canada, and the Zika virus. Gore visits the flooded streets of Miami, which apparently is the most endangered, populated city in the world for flooding, rise of sea levels. And Gore acknowledges he still has a complicated relationship with Florida. He still does go down there, apparently, because he does in the He's cool with Florida. They're cool with him, apparently. In December of 15, representatives from 196 nations made a historic pact in Paris to adopt green energy sources, cut down on climate change emissions, and limit the rise of global temperatures. But then, in May of 17, President Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, weakening efforts to combat global warming and embracing and strengthening voices of isolation, greed, and ignorance. Horrific, horrific. For decades, large numbers of people around the globe, including many of you, have worked intensively to increase our commitments to support the environment. Many of you organized in favor of the Paris Accords. I thank you. What should we do now? What are you doing now? How can I be helpful now in our response to the President's unacceptable action? I hope that we, the church, and myself in particular, will not, in King's words, be too moderate on climate change. Moderation is not what's called for. From what I hear around, I did get around the country a little bit and paid a little more attention to the media and sabbatical. Some deeply concerned people feel we are simply repeating unjust, historic, entrenched patterns, playing the same old broken record. And some deeply concerned people feel we are in a new chapter of danger and despair. I basically agree with both. Both and. Does it make sense to you that one way we can go forward is help America close the gap evermore? We've been closing the gap since our foundation. The gap was bigger in some ways when they were driving and massacring the red people off the land and then setting up slavery. Close the gap between our ideals, such as liberty and justice for all, and our current reality. Is that, or do you have a different way of looking at it, different way of us to spend our energy than having that frame? Some people think that frame's old and tired. No matter how long you have been working for justice in America, and we have some folks who have been in the struggle for over 80 years now, we need you. No matter how new you are to working to dismantle systemic oppression, we have some folks who say they're focusing in the work at the highest level ever in their lives. We need you, and we need everybody else in between and around. People with a significant experience have lots to offer and to learn. And folks newer to the struggle have lots to learn and much to offer. Right here, right now. Each and every one of us has a great capacity to bring goodness, justice, and mercy into this moment, this day, this afternoon. Everyone has the opportunity and the obligation to do our own soul work, to continue doing our own soul work, get clear and ready as possible. I want to bring you some more ideas and experiences of mindfulness. I know many of you have a lot more experience than I do. But I want to tell you, in the middle of these fast-paced, stressful times, I believe more than ever in the power of the body, mind, and spirit to be resilient, to pay attention, to up the life force in you. And a lot of this is just what you learned in kindergarten, but we all have to go back to every day. Be kind, be respectful, say I'm sorry, say I'm going to change my behavior, say I forgive you. Do the basics. That's soul work that Dr. King would say you got to be doing to be helping the big picture. I look forward to our months to come. And today I can tell you more than ever, I believe in a theology of love and hope beyond belief. And I believe we will continue to show up and stand up for love and hope. We'll continue to show up and stand up in tutoring and education reform, deconstructing prison industrial complex and getting good jobs for returning citizens, renovate and provide low-income housing. We'll get America back into the responsible countries of the world committed to the Paris Accord, and we'll reduce carbon emissions regardless of the president. One of my points to the president on that is, regardless, we're going to go. That's the soul-saving work of America will do with brothers and sisters, continue doing with brothers and sisters in the wider community. We will, I believe. Our current reality can seem overwhelming. The hostility towards marginalized people is scary. But tell me if you agree with this. We can all make a difference. We know that politics is the art and science of the possible. Politics is the art and science of the possible, but religion is the art and science of the impossible. Religion is the art and science of love and hope, which can make the impossible possible. I hope that the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this decisive hour. Let's continue joining in circles of respect, inviting each other to share honest thoughts and feelings. I feel called to listen, learn, and accompany you the best I can. Thank you for this blessed opportunity. Amen.